you have made it to class three. Class three. So to review, we're working on a primary orientation of openness, of compassionate connection. This is actually a fundamental in most of the meditation traditions in the world. This empathy dojo really comes out of my Buddhist training, combined with the best research I know on communication, on compassion and empathy. So what we find in this, I'm from a Chan lineage. That's what became called Zen in Japanese. And the whole idea in there is just to be able to be with what's arising is the essence of kindness from the heart. So we start with this openness. And in many of these mystic traditions, I can think of Chan Buddhism, of the Taoist tradition, of the Dzogchen tradition. The whole idea is that you meditate on this spaciousness. And it's actually by getting out of the way, by softening our tendency to constrict and to criticize and to close, that actually untangles the knots and starts to set things free. So as we get into this next week, we'll be working with emotional energies and things like that. And we'll start to work with more challenging emotions in ourselves and others. And the thing to know is that the main way of resolving the discomfort that comes from those challenging emotions and experiences is actually to create this sense of openness and spaciousness. And what you don't often hear in the meditation traditions, it's sort of underplayed, but it's in there, is this sense of compassion, or this sense of unconditional positive regard, that no matter what happens, we keep this sense of an open and loving heart. We let everything flow through. And this is really borne out by the research on empathy, compassion, secure attachment, how trauma is resolved. That if we can get this sense of underlying compassion, of wellness, of wholeness, of goodness, if we can tap into that basic goodness, we can actually resolve all sorts of discomfort and constriction. A great resource for you is Peter Levine's book. Well, Waking the Tiger is the big one. And then what was the other one? How Our Body Heals from Trauma and Restores Goodness, something along those lines. I'll find the title for you soon. But it's this basic work of you're coming into this well of goodness, and that helps to resolve these sort of intense experiences of contraction and pain within our system. It works just the same in our interpersonal relationships. When we bring this goodness, this wholeness, this happiness to the relationships, it actually resolves a lot of the problems. This is borne out. We'll hear later about the research from the Gottman Institute, who one of their main interventions is just upping the amount of positive interactions, of enjoyable interactions between couples, is where most of their work happens. And you find if you just have a higher ratio of enjoyable interactions to challenging interactions, the relationships thrive better. So one thing you can do is you just raise up the amount of enjoyable interactions that you have. It's called the Gottman ratio. You can look it up. It's considered to be a 5-to-1. You need 5 positive, enjoyable interactions to every one challenging, closed, constricted, negative interaction for a relationship to thrive. So we're doing that right now with the intrapersonal, working inside, laying down that template in our inner life and our self-talk, our self-compassion. We're eventually going to be able to bring that out to our outer life. But what are we doing? We're stoking ourselves up with these experiences of openness, of connection, of compassion. When exciting things happen, we give ourselves self-compassion. When challenging things happen, we talk to the wise friend. Hey, this challenging things happen. We're starting to fill up that reservoir of those experiences of openness, which are nourishing to the body and relaxing to the nervous system. So today, we've done enough of that, actually somewhat in Peter Levine's style. We've done enough resourcing now over these last couple of days that we can start to get into some of the challenging material. So we've stoked ourselves up in this openness, and now we're going to think about and look at criticism. We've looked at the open way of being, the compassionate, connected orientation. Now we're going to look square at where does the criticism come up. So perhaps, and you can drop a note in these comments, perhaps did you notice over these last couple of days of practice when you were trying to relax into openness, come from compassion, invoke the wise friend, did you run into some of that critical mindset, some of this, oh yeah, but that's actually wrong, or I really don't like that about myself. Some days we try to practice long enough, you'll run into it. It's just, we just can't find that unconditional compassion. But hopefully, as you practice, you will start to notice where the critical, constricted, or closed orientation comes up. We may notice this in our relationships. Like we start stoking ourselves full of this unconditional positive regard. It feels so good. And then our partner or coworker will come in and say something, and we'll notice our being tense up, and we'll snipe at them or something like that. And because of the contrast that we've created, we can really notice what seemed normal, because that's just how everybody talks on the sitcoms and in the office. What seemed normal now is highly recognizable as that constriction. And if we start to look at this, we can really notice where some of our communication has gone wrong, where we're like, oh, I think I'm a nice person, but we don't recognize where we're losing this sense of connection over and over and over again. So this is what we want to look at, but we're going to look at it first in ourselves. So your thought experiment is to contemplate, where do you criticize yourself? Where do you criticize yourself? If you've outgrown this, oh, I don't criticize, well, then think deeper and see if that's really true. And then, of course, if you have outgrown this, well, then let's learn the exercise so that you can help others, because most of us have not outgrown self-criticism. So where are your top three? See if you can think of, what are your top three places where you criticize yourself? Now, obviously, some of you have learned the trick which we'll work on a little bit later, where you can motivate growth without having to criticize yourself. But some of us still have places. I know for myself, I know this trick of motivate growth. I focus on my longings and my needs instead of criticism, but I find I'll criticize life for not being the way it is. I'll sort of get down and grumpy. And so what we mean is this constricted, kind of closed off orientation. Like if I just close off to life enough, it'll behave right. If I just give it the cold shoulder, it'll start acting right. Most of us have been around a long enough time to recognize that technique doesn't really work. So what we're going to do, what I want to invite you to do today, is that our mindset is is to think of when you screw up. Has anyone screwed up lately? Drop a note in those comments and let me know that a few of us aren't all alone. But you did a screw up. You said something that was a faux pas, or you forgot something, you overslept, you set yourself a deadline and you didn't do it. You said, this is the year I'm going to do my yoga practice 5 days a week, and then you didn't do it and you screwed up. This is one of the primary opportunities for this orientation of constriction and criticism. Why? Well, you can see it all around. This is often how young people are trained, unfortunately, to make themselves better, right? You do something wrong and we receive this criticism, we receive enough punishment to make it so that we dislike ourselves or our behavior enough, supposedly, that we'll be able to change. What we notice, unfortunately, is that the presence of discomfort doesn't empower us the most to make the most change. We're actually going to learn to change from this state of compassionate connection and openness. But first, we want to learn what to do when this voice of criticism comes up. So you screwed up. What I want you to do is invoke the wise friend. Invoke the wise friend. So think of, for a moment, can you think of a screw up in the last 10 years or something along the lines? When's the time maybe you have an intimate partner and you spoke to them in a way that later you're like, oh God, why did I do that? That doesn't meet my values at all. Or any of these places where you just, oh man, I blew it. You blew it. And then notice the tendency in the mind. Most of our minds will tend to, we'll say something. I'm using this language, you screwed up, you blew it, intentionally try to invoke one of these things where we just, oh man, I really didn't do a great job there. And I'd like you to invoke your wise friend and imagine how they would speak to you when you screwed up. So think of, oh yeah, this was how I screwed up. And then invoke the presence of that wise friend. And how would they speak to you? Maybe they're a mentor, but remember, they've got these qualities. They're present, they're compassionate, and their only agenda is for your well-being. Their only agenda is for your well-being. So rather than, I don't know, the kind of feedback that you've gotten in some of the places that you've worked, feedback is it's a dangerous land to live in. It means all sorts of different things. But imagine maybe you had a mentor who they were always coming to your place. They're totally present, totally compassionate, and just devoted to your well-being, to your thriving. And you come to them and you go like, oh, I screwed up. How might they speak to you? Let's take a moment and just imagine, how might they speak to you? So for me, my wise friend, I might want them to let me know that I'm not defined by my screw up. My screw up isn't now the thing that defines me forever. I might want them to let me know that my fundamental belonging hasn't been taken away just because I screwed up this one time, right? The love that was there, my humanity wasn't revoked because of my screw up. So I'm not defined by it. Oh, I'm not the screw up now. My fundamental humanity isn't there. And then my wise friend might ask me, what values did I wish to meet? How do I want to go about meeting those values in the future? What can I learn from this experience? So those are some of the things my wise friend might tell me. What might your wise friend tell you? How might they be with you when you really just blew it? This is going to start to give us a clue to how we might relate with ourselves when this tendency toward criticism, constriction, or closed-heartedness arises around aspects of ourselves that we don't like, aspects of our life that we don't like, and when we blew it, when we really screwed up. And I don't know about you, it seems to be common humanity, and I know it's true for me, that when I feel like I screwed up, when I feel like everything just gets so unstable. And these practices have been a lifeline of just being able to come back and go like, okay, even though you screwed up, you're still a human being. You're not defined by your screw up. You're actually a flow and change, and we can learn from this process and grow. So being able to internalize that wise friend, this is just another level of that compassion. And so your practice today, as we reach the last few minutes of our time this morning, your practice today is just look at, where are those criticisms coming up? And they might not be self-criticism. You might be going through the day and you might be really criticizing someone else. Well, even there, you could invoke your wise friend. What would wise friend do? WWWFD. What would wise friend do? How would they? And so, I mean, I'll admit I get a little judgy if I look on that social media too much. Okay, well, how would wise friend look at this social media? Okay, somebody says something that I don't like, and I have to respond. Well, how would wise friend respond? And we're learning to source ourselves rather than in the critical and constricted place, which is quite uncomfortable. Like it's really not a fun place to live. We source ourselves through acting from this place of openness, of sharing, of growth, and of flow, which is actually more in accord with how reality works, and it's more in accord with how the human heart works. So just notice your criticism. If you can, bring up that wise friend, and just like before, we've made a mindset this morning. It should be planted in there, a little cognitive filter throughout the rest of the day, but you could also do a formal practice. You could do wise friend with the hands on heart mudra or any of those mudras and just play with it. The main watchword in all of this is that we're going to play, see what happens, see what works for you, and this will integrate all the quicker. Okay, my wise friends, I hope you enjoy this practice today. We'll see you tomorrow.